Welcome back to the BVTV channel, and today we've got a massive video project I've been working on for about 2 weeks now, and that's because we're going to go through and rate and rank every single killer perk in the Dead by Daylight game up to right now, from worst to best. So basically from tier D to tier A. I'll give out the C+, the B+, and A+, just like I did for like the Killer's Power video that you guys really did enjoy. So I figured I'd do one ranking all the killer perks, and then next week I'll even do one for the survivors, ranking all the survival perks individually. So here we are, and we're going to kick things off in tier D. So kicking things off in tier D is going to be Coulrophobia. I probably butchered that, but it is actually a very rare clown perk. It's a max purple 3, and basically all it is your presence alone instills great fear. Survivors within your terror radius have a 50% penalty to healing progression speeds. This is great if you're, again, running a build, but as a standalone perk, this perk is honestly not that useful, and is pretty, counterable, to be honest. So Coulrophobia is one of those perks where I just kind of sit down like, thanks, but it's not very needed, and honestly it's a perk that no one really uses because, well, for one, it's not that great of a perk, and it's a massive letdown, and it can kind of take one of your 4 perk spots away, and it just kind of sits there being useless. So with that being said, Coulrophobia, you're the first perk to get officially put into tier D. So the next perk that we're going to be talking about in tier D is going to be the very rare the Ghostface perk, called Furtive Chase. It's purple max 3, and basically what that is, you become obsessed with one survivor. You lurk in the shadows, eliminating your victims one by one. When your obsession is hooked, Furtive Chase receives a token up to a maximum of 4 tokens, by the way. Each token decreases your terror radius by 4 meters while in a chase. So basically your terror radius is decreased by 16 meters, a maximum of 16 meters basically, which is 4 tokens. And here's the thing, if I'm in a chase, right, why do I care what my terror radius is if that person can already see me? Yes, it'll kind of, I guess, be semi-helpful to the other survivors in that area, but at the same time, if I'm chasing somebody, it doesn't seem all that useful. Now, there's another half to this too. When a survivor rescues the obsession from a hook, the rescuer becomes the obsession. You lose all your tokens if the obsession is sacrificed or killed. Now, here this perk is basically mixing in an aspect of make your choice and the whole other weird debacle with this. This perk, I think, on paper sounded good, but actually testing this out in game, it kind of sucks. And I said it because, like I said, Furtive Chase is one of those perks to where it doesn't make any sense. If I'm going to chase, I'm not going to be caring about another survivor. I'm already chasing a survivor. So that kind of negates, if I'm going to chase, my terror radius is going to be there no matter what, especially on that survivor I'm chasing. And I mean, I guess it's cool that, like, when a survivor rescues the obsession from a hook, the rescuer becomes the obsession. It's basically, tit for tat. But at the same time, this whole perk really is not helpful. And that is why it is in tier D. It's a perk no one should really use, if I'm being honest. Next, we have the very rare Huntress perk called Huntress Lullaby. It is a purple max 3, basically a hex rooting its power in despair. Your hunt is an irresistible song of dread which muddles your prey's attention. Survivors receive a 6% regression penalty when missing any skill check. Each time a survivor is hooked, Huntress's Lullaby grows in power. Again, from 1 to 4 tokens, time between the skill check warning sound and the skill check becomes shorter. When it hits 5 tokens, no skill check warning. Now, here's the thing. This perk isn't that awful. I mean, granted, it's awesome, but then again, you have to hook survivors 5 times to get the max amount, and that's if this hex stands for that long. This is, again, with hexes, it's very hard to judge hexes because, again, it's about the survivability of that hex. How long is it going to stand there? How effective is it on top of that? And Huntress's Lullaby doesn't really do it for me. Like the whole receive a 6% regression penalty when missing any skill check. Honestly, most of the people who have played this game have played this for at least a year now, and I don't see the reason to really use this perk, because I've sat there and as a survivor, when I've went against the Huntress Lullaby, it's not many people really miss skill checks like that. This game doesn't really make it hard to miss skill checks. So this is a perk that, when it first came out, was great. You know, I would have given this a different rating. But as of right now, with how developed we are in this game and how much this game has come along, Hex Huntress Lullaby just isn't useful, like, at all. So with that being said, it goes into tier D. So next we have the Hex, the third seal. It is a very rare hag perk. It is a max purple 3. And basically this is a Hex that hinders one's aura reading ability. Hitting a survivor with a basic attack while the Hex totem is active applies the blindness status effect. This effect applies to the last 4 survivors hit. Now, my little issue with this is that, again, just how we talked about the Huntress Lullaby, is the longevity of this perk. Is it a useful perk? Remember, you only get 4 slots. You want to make the most of those 4 perk slots you have. This is a perk to where the blindness status effect is something I'm not. I don't see the need of it. Like, it's great that they won't be able to see where a down survivor's aura is, basically. But other than that, I don't like this perk. And I don't like this Hex either. It's the only Hex that the hag has that I really, really dislike. Because, great, they're blind. That doesn't stop them from finding generators. It doesn't really hinder them like that. So they're still going to get the notification of whether someone's been hooked to kind of show. So honestly, with this perk, it's not very useful, like, at all. And so for that, Hex, the third seal, gets put into the D tier category. Next up, we have Insidious. It is a very rare, pretty much, I'm going to call it a base game perk. It came out when the game was around, so I'm just going to call it base game. This perk right here is a max purple 3. It's very rare, like I said. Insidious basically means you've unlocked the stealth ability. Standing still for 2 seconds grants you the undetectable status effects until you move or act again. The reason why this did not get into tier C is because of if you act, which means if you look around, do any of that, you immediately lose the Insidious effect. You have to stand still and do nothing to be stealthy. No thank you. Absolutely not. This perk right here was meant for campers. If you camp in the basement, or if you camp around the hook where no one can see you, that's what this perk is really meant for. It's meant for camping. And I'm not the biggest fan of camping. So with that being said, Insidious, you're in tier D. Next up, we have the very rare hillbilly perk called Lightborn. Unlike other beasts of the fog, you have adapted to light. Resistance to blindness is increased by 80%. Meanwhile, recovery from blindness is increased by 50%. To be honest, when it comes to flashlights, this is a perk that's basically only for flashlights. Because when you are blinded, the survivor gets off, and then you have to rechase them again after them being a pain in the butt the first time. The reason why Lightborn is in tier D is because I like the fact you can get a little, but you have to give a lot. Because with playing with Lightborn, it didn't really feel any different. I felt like I was still getting blinded just as quickly. So, and then again, to be staggered for 50% longer, that's a good about 5 to 6 seconds you no longer have now, because you have a red screen. And you can't really tell where the survivor is anymore. So Lightborn overall doesn't really, like I said, for me it didn't really make a difference. It literally felt the exact same, maybe an extra second of me not being blinded, but Lightborn just doesn't do enough for me to really put it in high regard, or for at least to see. It's a very below average perk. And what really irks me is that 50% increase. I feel like if you're gonna give us 80%, the 50% blindness, like the recovery time should not be 50%. I could say being 30. If it's at 30, 35, I'd be okay with it. But 50% is just way too much. it's just at that point, it's not even worth me putting onto my, actual perk tree. So, because of that, Lightborn, you're getting put into tier D. Next up is the very rare Demigorgon perk called Mindbreaker. Your distressing presence drains and weakens your prey. While repairing generators with less than 50% repair progression, survivors are afflicted by the exhausted status effect. Any existing exhausted status effect timers are paused while the survivor is repairing a generator. After ending the repair action, the survivor is afflicted by the exhausted status effect for 3 seconds. This perk irks my soul because if less than 50%, so they have to be less than halfway done for this perk not to kick in, right? And then on top of that, for 3 seconds after ending the repair action, there's a good chance that if a survivor, most survivors are smart nowadays, so this perk is very counteractable. They could just walk for 3 seconds, and by the time you get there, your terror rate is large enough for them to just get off. By the time you get there, it's 3 seconds, boom, then they start running again. And the only decent thing about this perk is the fact that it pauses the other exhausted status effect timers, but other than that, 3 seconds is really nothing. And the fact that they handicap with less than 50% repair progression, there's a lot of issues with this perk in general. And unfortunately, the exhausted status effect timer being paused is not enough to make it a C. So for those reasons of just being an overall not very good perk, Mindbreaker is getting put into tier D. Next up is Monstrous Shrine. This is a very rare perk. It's a base game perk, and basically what this perk does is your fervent care of hooks found in the basement have aroused the entity's interest. The basement hooks grant the following bonuses: a 9% faster entity progression, a 15% increased difficulty on escape attempts, and 9% increased penalty on escape fails. This perk would be good if this applied to all hooks, but the fact is this perk became very situational when it bring up the fact they have to be in the basement. So, look, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. There's going to be a very few times within one match you can be able to hook somebody in the basement. Sometimes I can go a match two without hooking people in the basement, and it's all throughout the map except for the basement. So, for those reasons, this perk actually does become situational. And with that being said, this is great if the situation calls for it, and you have a very situational build. But we're not talking about builds. We're talking about the perk itself. This is a situational perk, and for those reasons, the fact that it is in every hook and only the basement, it's actually not. It's good on paper, again, for when the game first came out, but as of now, honestly, it's a big no. So with that being said, this perk is going to be put into tier D. Next up is the very rare Huntress perk called Territorial Imperative. Basically, survivors' auras are revealed to you for 3 seconds when they enter the basement, and you are more than 32 meters away from the basement. Territorial Imperative can only be triggered once every 20 seconds. Here's my thing. When you are more than 32 meters away, by the time you get into the basement, there's a good chance that they might be gone. It's great that their auras are revealed to you for 3 seconds, but they could be gone because they could be in there to unhook somebody. They could be in there to quickly try to search through a chest, which could take about maybe 5-10, so you could possibly catch them in there. But if they're smart, they'll maybe it's a very situational perk. And then every 20 seconds, that isn't bad. Actually, that's the one thing I do like about it. The fact that it can be triggered every 20 seconds. So it's literally, it's like a blink of an eye, and you have it right back. So somebody goes in, you're like, oh, time to go back down there. My biggest issue with this is just how far you have to be. Granted, 32 meters may not seem like a lot to you guys, but it actually is. So by the time that you get halfway there, your 3 seconds of seeing their aura is gone. And then what do? And again, this is also a very counteractable perk as well, by the way. But, it's honestly, it's a very situational perk as well, and has to revolve around them being in the basement, but also being far away from the basement. So for those reasons, Territorial Imperative is in tier D. It's not very Next up, we have the base game perk. It's a very rare perk called Whispers. This perk basically it means that the entity is kind of speaking with you. If you kind of catch my drift here, you can sporadically hear the entity's whisper when standing within a 32-meter range of a survivor. And you would think typically this would be higher up, but here's the catch. This perk can be very, very misleading because you have to be looking in a certain direction. So let's say if it's within 32 meters, but you're looking in the wrong direction and you need to be looking a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, the entity will tell you no. So and then you could be going and looking in a completely different direction, and then you're still being told no, so then you're being misguided. And there are some times where I've heard no, look to the right a little bit, then yes. It's like, well, that makes no sense. If it's in a 32-meter range, you should be able to, but again, maybe that's also because of the first-person camera. There's a lot of wonky things with this perk. Overall, if you have a very silent, you have a very silent kill that's not going wah or ha 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 like the clown or the spirit or the nurse, this perk can kind of become in handy. But overall, because it's such a wide range too, it can lead to a lot of misdirections, and you could easily find yourself having a really bad trial because, again, you've been misguided because you're not using your own sense. You're using more of a verbal guidance that doesn't necessarily wrap around in a cone range, kind of straightforward to what you're looking at. So that can be a little bit of an issue too. So again, with that being said, Whispers, great on paper, but has a lot of misdirectional stuff with it. So it goes in tier D. Next up in tier D, we have the rare Huntress perk, Beast of Prey. Basically, it grants you the undetectable status effect after gaining Bloodlust tier 1. The status effect is removed once you lose Bloodlust. You gain 50% more blood points for actions in this hunter category. Here's the thing. When I've gained the undetectable status effects after gaining Bloodlust tier 1, so once you hit Bloodlust tier 1, you have to go to you'll get undetectable. That means you're about to hit Bloodlust tier 2. Here the weird thing with this is you're in the middle of a chase with somebody. That's how you get Bloodlust. So you've been chasing them for so long, and when you lose them, you have about 3 to 5 seconds to try to find them again for that to activate. So if you go undetectable, how is it supposed to help you in chase? It does the complete opposite of that, because if you're in chase, the undetectable status effect does not matter at all. They can see you. You're chasing them. And this is one of my big gripes with Beast of Prey. It makes no sense. This is more of a blood point perk. That's really all it is to keep chasing, because you're a hunter, so you have to be quote unquote stealthy. It's the complete opposite of what it doesn't make any sense. It irks me. Next up, we have the rare pick perk called Hangman's Trick. Basically, your ingenious modification to hooks alert you to tampering. Gain a notification when a survivor begins sabotaging a hook. While carrying a survivor, see the aura of any survivor within 6 meters of a hook. To be honest, this is how I feel about this perk. The reason why it's a D is because, yeah, it's cool that you gain a notification when a survivor begins a hook, the sabotaging hook, but within 2-3 seconds, the hook is gone. And while carrying a survivor, you see the aura of survivors within 6 meters of a hook. To be honest, you should be able to see a survivor within 6 meters of a hook, because, give or take, they only sabotage hooks when you're going to one. So you can see them literally on the way going to the hook. This perk was made for people. This perk was made for the blind illusion of telling you guys, hey, just don't use your eyes, don't use your brain. Let the perk do it for you. This is literally what this perk was made for. Guys, I know all of you are smart. You don't need this perk. It is probably one of the worst perks in this game. I am putting complete 100% faith that all of you guys are smarter than this perk. I mean, come on, so Hangman's Trick is getting. Next up, we have the rare Doctor perk, Overwhelming Presence. So basically, when survivors are within your terror radius, they suffer from inefficiency. Affected survivors' item consumption rates are increased by 100%. So basically, if they have add-ons, a medkit, a toolbox, a key, a map, I don't think I'm missing a flashlight. I think that's it. So this perk is great. Again, another situational perk. It's great if they have those items I just mentioned. Otherwise, this is completely useless. It takes up an extra perk slot that has no other effect besides damaging items. That's it. So, again, it's a tough bind here because this could be okay. This could have been a C if this also kind of maybe had like a 5% regression on something else. But because it's literally just medkits, it's just items like keys, maps, like all the things I just said. Overwhelming Presence isn't that useful. It takes up a slot, and that could be used for a whole bunch of other perks that we're about to talk about that are way better than this one. So again, because of that, it's in tier. Next up, we have Sloppy Butcher. It is a rare base game perk. Basically, wounds inflicted by successful basic attacks considerably increase the survivor's bleeding frequency and causes the mangled status effect. Bleeding and mangled effects caused by Sloppy Butcher return to normal once the survivor is fully healed. This is basically something that increases. It doesn't even really increase, like the healing time. Sloppy Butcher is just a perk that makes them bleed more. It's like instead of getting a small paper cut, you have now a big gash from that paper cut. And you're like, you're spewing out at this point. That's really all Sloppy Butcher. Sloppy Butcher is made to just have you bleed more. This would only, again, this is a good perk for a perk build, but individually, it sucks. Because, the mangled effect, it's orange, but it's not like you wind up losing, like, your life bar if you write, like, there is no timer on Sloppy Butcher, you just have an orange health bar now. So you have to basically mend yourself or, like, heal yourself again. And then once you heal yourself, the effect is gone, of course. That's how that part's okay. But overall, this perk is again a very defective perk. Wow, I'm not like when you have that orange bar, you can run around all day with it. You just bleed a lot more. That's all that is, and it's really not worth it. To recap all the perks in tier D, here we go: Coulrophobia, Furtive Chase, Hex, Huntress Lullaby, Hex the Third Seal, Insidious, Lightborn, Mindbreaker, Monstrous Shrine, Territorial Imperative, Whispers, Beast of Prey, Hangman's Trick, Overwhelming Presence, and Sloppy Butcher. So to kick things off here in Tier C, we have the very rare Oni perk called the Blood Echo. Basically, when hooking a survivor, all other injured survivors suffer from the hemorrhage status effect until healed and the exhaustion status effect for 45 seconds. Blood Echo has a cooldown of 60 seconds. Now, to be honest, when I think about Blood Echo, this is a very average perk. When hooking survivors, I actually do like the fact that all the other survivors do suffer that hemorrhage status effect. Until being healed, which means it kind of will take like a short period of time for them, like a short period of time longer for them to be healed, and they're exhausted. So that means this basically counteracts Sprint Burst, Lithe, Head On, a couple other perks that survivors have. Then gets negated because you have that exhaustion status effect for those 45 seconds, and it has a cooldown every minute. So for those 60 seconds, it's a base cooldown. You hook another guy, boom. Once again, they're exhausted, have the hemorrhage effect, if they're injured, of course. So a very nifty and unique perk, and again, it is very average. I wouldn't say it's too great, but it's definitely worthy of being a C perk. Next up, we have the very rare Nightmare perk called Blood Warden. As soon as the exit gates are opened, the Blood Warden activates. The auras of any survivors located within that area are actually revealed to you, but this only happens once per match, so here's the kicker though. Once per match, when you hook that first survivor, Blood Warden calls upon the entity to block both exit gates for 60 seconds. So they only have 60 seconds of them being stuck in the game because the enemy has blocked the exit gate. Well, they blocked the area to leave. To leave the realm. So, with that being said, Blood Warden actually is a pretty decent perk in hindsight. This perk was made to be And I'll tell you why, because this perk is meant to be a build perk, which means it's meant to be average unless paired with another perk like Noed and things like that. So this perk is meant to be added with something else to make it even better. But overall, Bloodwarden is a very average perk. So with that being said, Bloodwarden is meant to help and assist to make whatever it's being paired with better, and that other perk is meant to bring it up too, to make it reach its full potential. So Bloodwarden is actually going to be put into tier. Right, so next up in tier C, we have the very rare Trapper perk, Brutal Strength. Basically, your strength allows you to shred through your prey's defenses. It destroys dropped pallets, breakable walls, and generators 20% faster. Now, honestly, with a perk like this, it is as average as you can get. You know, you break things quicker, you get a little bit more, you get like an extra split second or two to, you know, throughout the trial to, you know, gain a little bit of an edge because you're using Brutal Strength to break pallets and stuff so that they don't get too far away. But overall, Brutal Strength is literally just an average perk. Next up, it is the very rare Executioner perk, Deathbound. When a survivor heals another survivor for 1 health state at least 32 meters away from the killer, the survivor performing the healing action will scream, revealing their location, activating Deathbound for the next 60 seconds. During that time, the survivor will suffer from the Oblivious status effect when further than 8 meters away from the healed survivor. This perk actually isn't too bad. I do like the fact that it does. This perk I actually do agree with. It does have to be kind of far away-ish for this perk to really activate. Unlike a couple of the other perks we talked about, this perk makes sense of why it has to be far away, because you're supposed to hear the scream from a distance. So that part does make sense, although the one thing that I don't necessarily really like is it doesn't give out the aura, just a little thing with the screen. And it does last for the next 60 seconds, and when you move away from that healed survivor, you guys are oblivious. Well, the survivor who healed you is oblivious, but I mean, honestly, there's a good chance you're probably not going to find either one of them. I mean, you might, if they're smart, they're going to stick together and it'll be a little bit easier for them to escape. But I mean, honestly, the Deathbound is a perk that the only thing that works for it is the distance, but it's also not really necessarily meant to find, just to tell, hey, they healed over there, so you may want to check that area. But by the time you get there, again, if you're not really good at following scratch marks, you're probably not going to find them. So I mean, that's a big that's why Deathbound is actually a C and not a B. So with that being said, Deathbound, you're in tier C. Next perk we're going to be talking about is a base game perk. It's a very rare perk called Distressing. Your terror radius is increased by 26%. You gain 100% more blood points for actions in the deviousness category. Now, one of the things that I actually do like about Distressing is the fact during that terror radius, it is extremely helpful, because there are times, even as a survivor, that the terrorist was so large that sometimes I'll get off the generator. I'll stop doing things to try to figure out where that heartbeat's coming from, what direction is getting louder in, and to find out they're not even really in my direction. They're just, that Distressing really helps to cause survivors to act kind of out of character and like give themselves up to you by mistake because they think you're closer than what you really are. So it's really a good perk for trying to, like, you know, toy with your survivor and also kind of play a little bit of mind games. And you get 100% more deviousness points in that category too. So again, a good overall solid average perk, which that is exactly why Distressing is in tier C. Next up, we have the very rare shape perk called Dying Light. Basically, you become obsessed with one survivor. Your obsession gains a 33% action speed bonus to unhooking and healing other survivors. Each time you hook a survivor other than the obsession, if the obsession is alive, you gain a token. If the obsession is alive, all survivors who are not the obsession gain a 3% penalty to repairing, healing, and sabotage speeds for each token. So basically, Dying Light doesn't have a cap. There's one time when I was playing, I had Dying Light with 9 tokens, which 9 times 3 is 27% regression penalty, which is pretty awesome. The fact this thing hangs in there as long as you don't kill the obsession. Or if you do, try not to kill the obsession, but if you know, of course, this is a great perk you have with builds. But overall, Dying Light is a pretty solid perk if you hook a lot of people. Now, the only thing I don't like is the fact that you get a little, but you give up a third, which is kind of a lot. Because your obsession gains a 33% action speed bonus to unhooking and healing, which at times can kind of be detrimental, especially if you're kind of one of those players who listen to sound a lot. A lot of times when you find people, it's via them healing. You hear the little thing going on, or you hear them grunting because they're in pain. So this perk is good, but it's due to the small little tad bits of, hey, that's if I can hook enough people, and you know, again, that's if I don't kill my obsession. So it's with Michael Myers, a lot of his all 3 of his teachables are very hard to kind of pick, but Dying Light was one of them that has great potential, but isn't that cut and dry either. It's got a, listen, you give a little to lose a lot. Again, that's a big issue I have. So that's why Dying Light is actually in tier C instead of B. So next up, we have the very rare Death Slinger perk, Hex Retribution. A hex that lashes out upon its destruction. Basically, any survivor who cleanses a dull totem actually suffers the Oblivious status effect for 45 seconds. And if any Hex totem is cleansed, including Hex Retribution, the auras of all survivors are revealed for 10 seconds. Now, here's the thing that is my issue with Hex Retribution. It has a lot of potential, but this is basically a lesser thrill of the hunt. Because it's not like you can one-tap these guys, none of that. When they do break the Hex Retribution, it simply put just reveals all their auras for 10 seconds. That's the only thing it does different than Thrill of the Hunt, and it also doesn't, like, you know, give you the notification when a dull totem is being worked on. That's the big difference between Thrill of the Hunt that I'll get into more detail with later in this video and Hex Retribution. So again, it's basically a dumbed down average Hex perk. And again, like I said before in the episode earlier, it all depends on the longevity of the Hex. What is it supposed to do? So the fact that it's meant to be cleansed is in a way kind of all right with me, because again, it is meant to be a retribution type thing. Oh, you've broken my totem, now I'm going to go get you. But at the same time, for those who are cleansing dull totems, for that, when it comes to the Oblivious and Blindness status effect, I'm not the biggest fan of them, because they aren't as big as this game hypes it up to be, if I'm being realistic with you guys. So for 45 seconds, it's okay. I mean, that's awesome. It's a long-lasting Oblivious status effect, but it's not enough for me to be like, wow, this is a perk and a Hex I absolutely need. And it is, again, a solid average Hex perk, which is why it gets put into tier C. Next up, we have the very rare Hag perk, Hex Ruin. Man, where do I begin here? You know what? Before I even tell you what it does, I'm going to go into what this perk used to be. And then I'm going to go into the game description and then tell you how it is now. So to be fair with it. Before, Hex Ruin basically used to be a big issue. Like, this perk was a perk you had to have on. It was an ultimate game changer that unfortunately got nerfed. When I first played this, Hex Ruin was a perk I honestly feared, because it forced you to hit great skill checks. Otherwise, that gen you were working on, for those of you who complain that the generator's timing, like speed, is too slow, you would have hated it if you're a good skill check person and a horrible great skill checker, because you're going to be sitting at that machine for a very long time. Trust me. And if you got off that machine, it was going to regress. So it literally made you want to kick the generator yourself, basically. So now I got that out the way, let's go into what the game says Hex Ruin does. Basically, a hex that affects all survivor generators, repair progress. All generators are affected by Hex Ruin. While a generator is not being repaired by a survivor, it will immediately and automatically regress repair progress at 200% of the normal regression speed. That is still an awesome thing. But like I said before, with the fact that you had to hit a great skill check, otherwise the machine would stop working. It would still spark up and low-key still regress. Now that's not the case. As long as you hit a good or great skill check, you're fine. It won't regress. It'll just keep going. But as soon as you get off, it still regresses. This is personally a perk I really did love, and unfortunately, as cliche as this may sound, Hex Ruin has been ruined. Literally, it's been nerfed. It's not the same. So that's the big reason why I personally give Hex Ruin a C. It's no longer what it used to be, and it's not really a game changer anymore, especially with Gen Rushing being at its highest peak right now. So, to be honest, Hex Ruin gets a C. So next we have the very rare Doctor Perk, Monitor and Abuse. Basically, while you're in a chase, your terror radius is increased by 8 meters. Otherwise, your terror radius is decreased by 8 meters, and your field of view is increased by 10 degrees. Now, I know a lot of people aren't too big on field of view perks, but the reason why Monitor and Abuse actually didn't get a D and a C is actually because of the field of view. Because the terror radius being increased by 8 meters while you're in a chase, whoop-de-doo. I mean, you're in a chase anyway, your terror radius is going to be loud. It doesn't matter if it's 8 meters louder. It doesn't really matter. Although, what does matter is the fact when you're not, your terror radius is decreased by 8 meters and your field of view is increased by 10 degrees. Now, of course, that shrinks, of course, when you're again your terror radius when you're in a chase. So, again, this is a big deal. When you're not in a chase, it's easier to find people. I mean, trust me, I like the first person camera. It makes sense because it shows that the killer is focused on trying to kill that one survivor. But that extra 10 degrees can be the difference maker of you spotting a Claudette's shirt compared to when you don't have that 10 and you completely walk by it because you don't even acknowledge the rocks that she's hiding behind. That right there could be the massive difference, and that's why Monitor and Abuse for me gets a C. Next up, we have the very rare Oni perk called Nemesis. Basically, what this is a perk that kind of seeks retribution on those who mess with you, and you'll see how that is in just a second. Basically, a survivor who blinds you or stuns you using a pallet or locker becomes your obsession. Anytime a new survivor becomes the obsession, they are affected by the Oblivious status effect for 60 seconds, and their aura is shown to you for 4 seconds. Now, of course, the killer can only be obsessed with one survivor at a time. The reason why this got a C is because there's a couple things I don't like about this perk. Number one, the Oblivious status effect. Again, yes, it does last for a minute, but honestly, it's not when I see the blindness status effect or the Oblivious status effect, I'm not really the most keen on them because it affects that one person. That's it. Like, if you're still chasing that person then because they dropped the pallet on you or hit you with head on, I'm assuming you're still gonna be chasing them if you know how to follow scratch marks. So again, that Oblivious status effect does nothing, because why they can try to save somebody or see an aura or yada 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 if you're chasing them with a big angry mallet of the big angry freaking weapon that's gonna break them in two, So that's just how I feel about it. And the fact that their aura is shown to you for 4 seconds, you're basically stunned for most of that duration. So technically it says 4 seconds, but you only get to see them for a split second, really, when they're running to a certain direction, and then you see their legs as the aura. That's all that is. So the only thing I like about it is that the obsession will constantly change, and this is a good perk to use with a perk like Dying Light. But again, I'm not talking about perk builds here. This perk is meant to be built with something else. That's it. So again, it's a solid perk in theory, but not by itself. So that's why it is a completely average perk by itself, which is why it gets a C. Next up is the very rare Wraith perk called Shadowborn. You have a keen vision in the darkness of the night. Your field of view is 15 degrees wider than normal. This does not stack with other field of view increases though. Here's the thing, when it says you have a keen vision and dark sight, it doesn't matter what map it's on. It's still going to give it 15 degrees wider than normal. I just want to point that out there. And yeah, this perk is pretty much self-explanatory. I mean, you get an extra 15 degrees, but like I said, with the monitor and the views, you know, the more you can see as a killer is an actual advantage. That's going to be the difference maker of seeing that rock. And if you see a little, you know, bright hair, like purple Feng Ming hair, you can now see that with that extra 15 degrees instead of the normal field of vision you typically have, or you wouldn't be able to see that like little lock of hair. So that's again, it's a solid average perk. The next up, we have the base game perk that's is actually a very rare perk called Spies from the Shadows. Basically, the crows found within any map can communicate with you directly 100% of the time. Calling crows give you a visual cue when you are within a 36-meter range. Spies from the Shadows, though, has a cooldown of 5 seconds whenever it gives you that cue. So this is a perk that honestly is average at best. This can also be a bit of a distraction, because just because you're within a 36-meter range, by the time you kind of try to figure out where that, I mean, the visual cue is pretty loud. You'll definitely see the little thing that it does. But by the time you get there, good chance that person's probably going to be gone. And this perk can easily be counteracted by a specific individual like Jake Park's Calm Spirit. But again, this perk is actually extremely counteractable. Also, it is also underrated. So, I mean, this does go well with any killer. Specifically suits stealth killers, but yeah, Spies from the Shadow is a very average perk at best, and I don't feel this perk should honestly have a cooldown. That's the one issue I have with Spies from the Shadows, and that's kind of what prevented it from being like a C+ to like B, is why does it have to have a cooldown? Because if someone runs, if a survivor runs past a crow, it's gonna caw. So why should a crow and the perk have a cooldown if the crow is gonna keep cawing? And you know, that it doesn't make any sense to me. So that's why, again, Spies from the Shadows is this. Next up, we have again, another base game perk, a very rare perk though, called Unrelenting. You recuperate faster from missed attacks made with your main weapon. The cooldown after missed basic attacks is reduced by 30%. This does not attribute to lunging, by the way. If you do a lunging attack, you're still going to have a regular cooldown for it. Yeah, Unrelenting, honestly, again, another self-explanatory perk, is average at best. I mean, again, you get 30%, you know, reduced from missing a basic little quick slash. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about Unrelenting. It's a basic C perk. Honestly, it's very average. Next up, we have the base game perk. It's a rare perk called Deerstalker. It basically reveals dying survivors' auras when standing within a 36-meter range. This is really good. This is really good for you sluggers out there, because I know there's a lot of you. #sluggers. And yeah, it's basically it. It's really, again, another self-explanatory part. When they're dying in the dying state, it's again a great perk to put builds into if you have the right build. But again, it's a perk that's meant to be useful by surrounded by other perks, not just itself. It's by itself, it's average, kinda. So it really barely made the cusp of tier C, but it's a tier C perk. So next up, we have the rare hillbilly perk called Enduring. Basically, you are resilient to pain. You reduce the duration of pallet stuns by 50%. And that's really all that is. That's actually why it is a C perk. It's pretty simple. It's nothing over the top. You just, you know, take pallet stuns 50% less. So I guess that's a plus in reality. That's an average, regular, everyday perk. Next up, it is the rare nightmare perk called Fire Up. Basically, each time the survivors complete a generator, Fire Up grows in power. For each generator completed, gain a 4% stackable buff that grants a speed bonus to picking up, dropping, vaulting, damaging generators, and breaking pallets and breakables. You know, the little breakable doors, that too, for the remainder of the trial. Overall, this perk is very average. All it does, again, is give you a speed boost in doing things. It doesn't give a speed boost for attacking or cooldowns or anything like that. It's just to have you do things quicker, that you can be semi-quick on your feet. And remember, you get a 20% stackable. So, I mean, well, of course, you have to gain that 20%. So, yeah, overall, it's a decent perk. I wouldn't say it's anything game-changing. It is an overall average perk that is best with speed builds, or, you know, while things go on, you gain speed, so on and so on, and plus it's stackable. Next up, we have the rare Ghostface perk called I'm All Ears. Basically, when any survivor performing a rushed action within 48 meters from your location will have their auras revealed for 6 seconds. I'm All Ears can only be triggered once every 40 seconds. Now, this perk, I have mixed emotions about this perk. And the reason for that being is because I like the fact they have to be within 48 meters. I wish it was more like, you know, within 32 meters, because honestly, it's great that their aura is shown for 6 seconds. I mean, you have the potential to intercept them, but at the same time, can you even get there in time? You know, that's the question. But I do like the fact it can be triggered once every 40 seconds. I do think that is a reasonable thing, especially when they're, you know, revealing their aura. I think that that's a good give and take type of situation. Although I'm All Ears, like I said, it's just a very average perk, and it's not. I feel like maybe if this was to be reworked, maybe for like 8 seconds, I would have gave this a B. But 6, I don't feel, and maybe I'm being a little too stingy here, but I don't feel like that 6 seconds is enough for me to really think this perk can be properly utilized. Next up, we have the rare Wraith perk called Predator. Basically, scratch marks left by survivors will spawn considerably closer together. This can actually be a really good thing because it's a lot easier to track. And let's be honest, those scratch marks of the killer, when the survivors run, it can be all over the place. Especially if you're in the cornfield maps, it is extremely difficult to track the scratch marks due to everything that's going on. So like you may see one scratch mark out of the whole bunch of them and go in the wrong direction. Now that they're closer, it's a lot easier to acutely attract them and, you know, be able to constantly be on the hunt, being a true predator. And I kind of like the play on words there. I'm going to give myself a thumbs up for that. But that's what makes Predator a C perk. It's not something that's game changing, nor C plus or B perk worthy. It's just a perfect average perk, you know? Next up, we have the rare spirit perk called Spirit Fury. Basically, after breaking 2 pallets, the next time you are stunned by a pallet, the entity will instantly break the pallet. But here's the kicker: you still suffer from the stun effect penalty. Now, that right there is my supreme problem, because I like the fact, you know, after breaking 2 pallets, the next time you get stunned by a pallet, the entity will break it, right? But why am I still? And the perk here is called Spirit Fury. So in a Fury, typically what I've seen in video games and in movies, and you know, is that when someone's in a Fury, they take pain quite well because they're that pissed off, you know. So if a pallet hits me and I don't have to break it, the entity immediately breaks it. Why do I then take a stun status effect? I feel like I shouldn't take it because I'm furious, I am enraged, I'm in fury, I'm in Spirit Fury. So that's my biggest issue with this perk. I was going to give it a B, but once I actually really read it and actually tried to test it out myself, this perk it didn't make sense to me at that point. So that's why Spirit Fury gets a C, just on the fact of not being able to recover, not of having a stun effect. I don't feel it's fair when it's already being broken as soon as it even touches me, type thing. Next up, we have the rare Oni perk, Zanshin Tactics. Basically, the auras of all pallets, breakable walls, and vault locations are revealed to you within a 24-meter range. When a survivor is damaged, Zanshin Tactics becomes inactive for 30 seconds. This basically kind of gives you a tactical edge for loopers, so that we can kind of know where they can try to go for a pallet or where they can try to vault from. You can kind of strategically try to like mind game them and get the advantage and get a hit. The only problem that I don't understand with this is a tactic. Typically tactics work until you win. which in this case they'd be in the dying state. Technically, you know, in my head, that's how that would work. But why is it when I damage a survivor, it becomes inactive for 30 seconds? It just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, wait, that doesn't. Why would you? You know, it doesn't equate to me. I feel that there shouldn't be I feel like it should become inactive when I've put that survivor that I've injured into a dying state, or a survivor I've injured into a dying state. Then that would make sense to where you'd probably have it inactive for like 60 seconds, maybe 120 seconds, something like that would make more sense because you've technically accomplished the goal. But I guess that's, like I said, that's my only gripe with this perk, and that's also why I put it at a C. So for those reasons, Zanshin Tactics, you were in tier C. Last but not least, in tier C, it is the perk getting the C+, the rare Deathslinger perk called Gearhead. It's getting the C+, and I'll explain why in just a second. After hitting a survivor 2 times with your basic attack, Gearhead activates for 30 seconds. While Gearhead is active, each time a survivor completes a good skill check while repairing, the generator will be revealed by a yellow aura for as long as it is being repaired. Now, this right here is actually really nifty because now it tells you where people are. You hit survivor twice with your basic attack. Now you can then see, and then it activates. And there's no cooldown because, you know, once the 30 seconds are over, you can do it again, and boom, now you can see. So that's why it's getting the C+, because it had B potential, and out of all the perks in the C tier, this one had the most potential, and that's why it's getting the C+ award. To recap all the perks in tier C, it is Blood Echo, Blood Warden, Brutal Strength, Deathbound, Distressing, Dying Light, Hex Retribution, Hex Ruin, Monitor and Abuse, Nemesis, Shadowborn, Spies from the Shadows, Unrelenting, Deerstalker, Enduring, Fired Up, I Am All Ears, Predator, Spirit Fury, Zanshin Tactics, and the C+ Gearhead. To kick off tiered B, we have the very rare Trapper perk, Agitation. It increases your movement speed while transporting bodies by 18%. While transporting a body, your tear radius is also increased by 12 meters. See, the thing I really like about Agitation that makes it B is the movement speed. Because, to be honest, sometimes when you're transporting a survivor, it can be really difficult. Because I'm not gonna lie, some of these survivors are extremely talented at, like, circle, or however you survivors do it sometimes. Like for me, I just kind of go in a circle. Some people just flick back and forth. They're really good at doing that really fast. So your screen and holding them can be really hard because you're moving back and forth with them. And with Agitation, while you're moving back, forward, left and right, you're still moving at an 18% speed. So you get there quicker before they can get off of you. And on top of that, while you're transporting somebody, your tear radius is increased. So that means people are gonna know, okay, let me get away from here because this guy's coming towards me. Especially if you're gonna hook him right next to a generator. Really good perk. I do actually really like the Agitation perk. That's why it's in tiered B. Next up is a perk that seems to be everyone's favorite perk as a killer. It is the very rare Cannibals, BBQ, and Chilli. Basically, after hooking a survivor, all other survivors' auras are revealed to you for 4 seconds when they are further than 40 meters away from the hook. Each time that a survivor is hooked for the first time, gain a 25% stackable bonus to all blood points of 100%. The bonus blood points are only awarded post-trial. Now, here's the thing here. And I can't help but read with this. I know everyone's like, this is an A+ perk. This is an A perk. What are you doing? I don't mind BBQ and Chilli, but honestly, it is so overused, and my big issue is they have to be more than 40 meters from the hook. If they're not doing a generator, what makes you think they're not going to keep moving from that spot by the time you get there? Let's be honest now, when you hook somebody, boom, it immediately activates. By the time you turn on, that's a second or 2 already wasted. So then you only get to see them for those 3 to 2 seconds, but depending on how some of you guys have your sensitivity. So you kind of wasted that much time. And honestly, 2 seconds ain't going to give you enough time to cover enough track when they're more than 40 meters away. I guess the only good thing is that I can say also on top of that is if their auras aren't showing, that means one of 2 things. They're either in a closet or they're within the survivor range of you. So they're within the hooked survivor's range of you. So that means you can kind of try to sniff them out about where they might be. And if you're lucky, you find them. But honestly, BBQ and Chilli, to me personally, isn't all that. So I think it's a great solid B perk, but definitely to me honestly isn't an A perk. Next up in tier B, it is the very rare Wraith perk called Bloodhound. Basically, fresh blood marks are considerably more discernible than normal and can be tracked for 4 seconds longer than normal. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, Bloodhound is an amazing perk because it's like when they're bleeding, it is a neon red compared to the dark red we have. And it is extremely more, it's so much more easier to really hunt for your survivor because it's so distinct that there's no way you can miss it. Like, if you're bad at tracking scratch marks, trust me, this is the perfect perk to have, especially if you're chasing down injured survivors. It's a big pool of bright neon blood, and it's super easy to track. That's why Bloodhound is in tier B. Next up, it is going to be the very rare Demogorgon perk, Cruel Limits. Every time a generator is completed, all windows and vault locations within a 24-meter radius from the completed generator are blocked for all survivors for the next 30 seconds. You see the aura of the vault locations blocked by Cruel Limits for the duration. Now, I actually really do like Cruel Limits. It's one of the few, I think it's like the only perk really of the Demogorgon I actually really like. And that's because of the fact it stops, if let's say if you're right next to a gen that's being completed or you're about to get there, now all they have to use to defend themselves is now a pallet. So the moment they throw that down, unless they keep jumping over that, they can't vault through windows, they can't go through any vault locations in general, and it sticks them within that 24 years. Now they actually have to rely on trying to either swiggity swoop, you can't take my boot, or other stuff. So it's the pallet or swiggity swoop. They got to be really good at looping or really good at evading, and this really does, and it really puts a cruel limit, no pun intended, on what the survivor's option has to try to escape you. Now it makes it a little bit easier for those 30 seconds that you have it. So next up in tier B, we have the very rare Death Slinger perk, Dead Man's Switch. After hooking the obsession, Dead Man's Switch activates for the next 45 seconds. While activated, any survivor that stops repairing a generator before it is fully repaired causes the entity to block the generators until Dead Man's Switch effect ends. Affected generators are highlighted by a white aura. The killer can only be obsessed with one survivor at a time. See, here's the thing. With this perk, it acts like the fact for 45 full seconds, all the gens that people will stop working on are then shut, like they're stopped. They can't work on them until the 45 seconds ends, which is really, really unique because you have thrilling tremors. At the moment that they pick somebody up, it'll block itself for a while, things like that. But this perk here is really, really just awesome, and this is one of my favorite Dead Man Switch because of the fact that, and unfortunately it doesn't go for all survivors. That would be a little bit too overpowered, but the fact it goes for the obsession, it can definitely show you, especially if you see 3 gens stop working, that means all three survivors that are remaining besides the one on the hook are possibly going to be coming to your direction. So it's extremely useful to know, hey, I'm going to try to go around the area, not camp, not patrol, but at least try to look for them. That way you can at least stop maybe or thwart 1 or 2 and trying to come to save that one person. That's also it's a really good perk to have. Next up, we have the very rare cannibal perk, Franklin's Demise. Basically, your successful basic attacks make the survivors drop their item on impact. The lost item is damaged in the fall, losing 10% of its base amount of charges. This is a very good perk, especially for when you go against keys, flashlights, maps, medkits, so on and so on. This perk is a great, you're not going to be keeping these, because I'm going to keep whacking every time you try to pick it up. And every time they pick it up, they've lost 10% of their base amount of charges. So if multiple people keep picking up, they're going to only have like maybe half of it left, 60% of it left, depending on how many times you hit the person with that item. So it's a very useful perk to stop, getting, blinded consistently, stop people from using medkits fully, so on and so on. People dropping keys that they want to use to try to find the hatch, things like that. So it's very, very useful, very, very effective. And yeah, so that's why Franklin's Demise is a B. But because it is only like to prevent add-ons, that's why it actually didn't hit the A spot. So yeah, that's actually the only little caveat of why it wasn't an A perk. Next up, it is the very rare Hag perk, Hex Devour Hope. Basically, when a survivor is rescued from a hook at least 24 meters away, Devour Hope receives a token. 2 tokens gain a 5%. Well, when you get 2 tokens, you gain a 5% haste status effect. 10 seconds after hooking a survivor for a duration of 10 seconds. And when you hit 3 tokens, survivors suffer from the exposed status effects, and you can see them throughout the match. And then 5 tokens grants the ability to kill survivors by your own hand. Now, this is whether they've been on the hook or not. But it's like you have to hook them 5 times and hope that they get saved 5 times when they're at least 24 meters away from you, and then you get that. So Devour Hope, honestly, is a really good perk, but then again, another thing that kind of questions it is the longevity. How long will this Hex Totem be around? Because for some reason, survivors seem to find the Devour Hope Totem extremely quickly. It blows my mind sometimes, even when you have it perfectly guarded. So yeah, I just want to keep that in mind. I mean, overall, Devour Hope, that's the only thing that really stopped Devour Hope from being an A, is the fact of how long this perk takes. It's one of those that like take throughout the trial, and you've got to be really keen with it and constantly be trying to hook. And it can, and that's if, that's if it stands for a while, because once that, Devour Hope emergence comes up, people can start hunting for it, and you got to try to find them as quickly as possible. Is once you hit 5 tokens, or at least even 2, once you hit, 3 tokens, they're gonna know. So keep that in mind. But yeah, Devour Hope is in tier B. Next up, we have the very rare Legion perk, Mad Grit. Basically, while carrying a survivor, you suffer no cooldown for missed basic attacks, and successfully hitting another survivor with a basic attack will pause the carried survivor's wiggle timer for 4 seconds. Basically, when you're about to put somebody on the hook and everyone wants to crowd the hook, this is a great way to sit there, hit everyone, stop the timer for 4 seconds, wait a couple seconds, knowing that they're about to wiggle again, hit another person again, now it stops again, now you have everybody injured because they wanted to be trolls and be cool and save their buddy, while now all being injured. That person's still gonna go on the hook, and now you get to tap it. Now you get to one tap everybody. Sounds like a really great deal. Honestly, Mad Grit is one of the few perks that Legion has that I feel is literally a perfect B. Like, it's not an A, it's not overpowered, it's not too average, it is right in the middle. It's like that Goldilocks story where that one porridge is perfect. That it's like the perfect perk for a B. Next is the very rare shape perk called Play With Your Food. You become obsessed with one survivor. Every time you chase your obsession and let them escape, you receive a token up to a maximum of 3 tokens. Each token increases your movement speed by 5%. Performing a basic attack or special attack, though, spends 1 token. The killer can only be obsessed with one survivor at a time. Here's the thing here. Like I said before, with Michael Myers, it's really hard to judge his perks because of just how it really comes down to your playstyle. And these are all really good perks if you really do play with your obsession and you use it to get your speed boost to quickly hit another person and you're still fast. Then you can catch up to them even quicker and then down them and boop, you're on the hook. You still have 5% speed movement. You try to chase the obsession wherever you can, let her go, and then you now have 15% boost again. So it really just depends on your playstyle. Like for this one, honestly, I would have to say I give it a B just because it's such a hard place to put it. I didn't think it was a C or a D, but I didn't think it was an A, so I kind of had no other choice but to put it in tier B. Next up is the very rare Nightmare perk, Remember Me. You become obsessed with one survivor. Each time you hit your obsession with a basic attack, you increase the opening time of the exit gates by 4 seconds, up to a maximum of 16 seconds. Now, of course, the obsession is not affected by this perk because you're attacking them, so they can still open up the gates properly without the 4 to 16 second penalty. And the killer can, of course, as we know, only be obsessed with one survivor at a time. So this perk is really good, especially when you have that maximum of 16 seconds. So if you have a couple injured survivors and you're chasing one, boom, you down that one, boom. If you can try to get the other one, if it's in the same vicinity, that's 2 people you just down. That's two people you get to hook while the exit gate isn't even open yet. So that means not only do they have to sit there for a maximum of anywhere from 4 to 16 seconds, The way to get out, the game is now delayed a little bit longer for you to capitalize. This is a good perk, again, to capitalize on and delay the game. That's why it's in tier B. So next up in tier B, it is the very rare shape perk, Save the Best for Last. Basically, you become obsessed with one survivor. You earn a token for each successful basic attack that is not dealt to the obsession. Now, guys, remember, that's going to be key and important right there. Each token grants you a stackable 5% decreased successful basic attack cooldown. You can earn up to 8 tokens. Hitting your obsession, though, with the basic attack will cause you to lose 2 tokens. You can no longer gain tokens if your obsession is sacrificed or killed, and remember, the killer can only be obsessed with one survivor at a time. The main part of this, because after using this perk for quite a while, I've made a lot of mistakes with it. You are not supposed to hit your obsession. You really do want to earn as many tokens as possible, so you hit everyone but the obsession. This is literally supposed to save the lower strode, like you're supposed to save the best for last. And that's what this perk basically feeds off of, is hitting everyone else, and then when you're finally dead, then you kind of decimate the obsession. So that's what that's meant to do, and I kind of finally understand that now after going through a couple of playthroughs using it. It's now kind of made more sense to me about why Save the Best for Last is actually a really good perk. You get to torment 3 out of the 4, and then at the end, that's when you really go all in for decimating the obsession. So that's why Save the Best for Last is in tier B. Next up is the very rare nurse perk, Thanatophobia. Basically, for each injured, dying, or hooked survivor, all survivors receive a penalty of 4 to a maximum of 16% to repair, healing, and sabotage speeds. This is actually a relatively really useful perk because it does slow down the game little by little for every injured, dying, or hooked survivor you have. So once they hit that maximum of that 16%, it really does slow everything down, and it's one of the better perks to eventually stop gen rushing. If you can kind of catch them early while they're gen rushing, it kind of will slow the game down a little bit, not too much, but it gives you a small window to try to really do some damage and try to hook some people while they're injured or hooked. The more that happens, again, that maximum of 16% to all those speeds starts to slow down, and that's one of the better nurse perks, and that's why Thanatophobia is in tier B. Next up is the very rare hillbilly perk, Tinkerer. When a generator is repaired to 85% repair progress, it triggers a loud noise notification, and you are granted the undetectable status effect for 12 seconds. Believe it or not, I actually really do like Tinkerer, but my only issue with it is 85% honestly may not be enough time to get to that generator. Even though he has the chainsaw, it still won't be that effective, because by the time you get there, they could be anywhere from 90 to 95% done, and if there's more than one, by the time you try to swing one of them off of there, bing, that generator is already done. But it is a really good concept of the fact that it sends a loud noise notification, shows you kind of where that generator is, and then you become undetectable for 12 seconds, which is really, really helpful, especially if you're stealthy and you're not actually using it on the hillbilly. Let's be honest, how many people actually use the killer's perks on the respective killer? Not many nowadays. So this is actually a really good perk. Like I said, if it was more of a 75%, maybe 70% repair progress, I would have put it in tier A. But for that reason, it's in tier B. Next up is the rare plague perk, Corrupt Intervention. Basically, 3 generators located furthest from you are blocked by the entity for basically 2 minutes at the start of the trial. Survivors cannot repair these generators for the duration. Affected generators are highlighted by a white aura. Here's the thing, and before you guys say, oh, this should be an A perk, I do like Corrupt Intervention, but after those 2 minutes, that's it. You have now lost a whole perk slot for just 2 minutes of having them not do 3 of the furthest generators to you. Now, yes, it's like, then do some damage early on for those 2 minutes if you find them within that time. And honestly, like I said, it is a great perk, but because it's only for literally the start of the trial and then you're now down to 3 perks, that's my biggest problem with Corrupt Intervention. And if it was 3 minutes, maybe I could see myself giving this even a B plus. But Corrupting Dimension to me is just a solid B, and it almost went down to C because it really just take away from a much more, in my opinion, useful perk slot, useful perks. So that is why that Corrupting Dimension is in tier B. Next up, we have the Rare Legion perk Discordance. Anytime 2 survivors or more are working on the same generator, the generator's aura is highlighted in yellow for 12 seconds. Now, I actually really do like this perk because that means Legion or anyone who uses this can now, not only does it actually notify them, hey, you're about to be in for a gen rush, or hey, there's 2 people working on this, it now tells them, hey, people are here, come get them. And that's the best part about Discord. Not only does it show you, hey, this thing is being worked on, so you have to stop this, but now you can also way more easily find survivors, attack them, take out the gen, and then keep it moving, you know. So that's what I really do love about Discordance. And again, it's another perk solution that sits perfectly well in the B category. It is a game changer, but it is more of a game changer because now you can easily find survivors. It doesn't necessarily affect the survivors that much, but it also makes them have the thing, hey, if I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna know that we have to really hurt this thing up because he's coming, or they're coming. So that's the best part about Discord, and that's why I think it's, again, another solid B perk. The only thing I could say, wow, that would make it an A for me, is if it did that for maybe 14 seconds, 15 seconds. Maybe that's also me nitpicking. Honestly, Discordance is sitting right there in the B2. Next up is the Rare Executioner perk, Forced Penance. Survivors who take a protection hit are inflicted with the broken status effect for 60 seconds. This is a huge perk, and I love the fact that it's in tier B. I wouldn't say it's in tier A just because of this. With people who are off the hook, you have a lot of people who like to sit there and stand behind them. With Forced Penance, now for 60 seconds they're broken. That means they can't even do that because now they can't even heal themselves anymore, so they have to run away. That means you have time now to chase the person who was off the hook, down them, put them on the hook, and now for those 60 seconds, if you were able to put the first person down again and put him on the hook, now you can go right, try to find the other person who's broken, who still can't be healed. By the time they try to get healed, it may be too late. It teaches the survivors to not be so altruistic, if you will. But here's the thing, Forced Penance I feel like really should be broken for 90 seconds. I feel that would really make this perk an A perk. For 90 seconds would be absolutely lethal. And I bet you would not see a lot of survivors doing that anymore. Guarantee you that. But maybe that's also another one of my pet peeves, or like, you know, me being nitpicky. But yeah, that's why Forced Penance is a B. Next up, we have the base game perk that is also a rare perk called Iron Grasp. Basically, effects of survivors struggling are reduced by 75%. Time to struggle out of your grasp is also increased by 12%. This perk got to be put into tier B because this is really good for a lot of smaller killers who immediately struggle with carrying survivors. The littlest amount of sway can literally littlest amount of struggling can literally move them back and forth like there's no tomorrow. So this perk does a good job of negating the, oh my god, this person is doing too much, now I can't put them on the hook because I'm stuck looking at a tree because I can't move properly anymore. It does a great job of negating that, and negating a specific perk from Kate Denson called Boil Over, which I'll get to that next week when I talk about the survivor perks and rate them from D to A. So yeah, it's all about just with Iron Grasp, the idea of having an easier time putting survivors on the hook, and it's that simple, and that's exactly what makes this perk so well, because it does the one great function, and there's not many complaints that you can really have. It's just not necessarily an A perk. It's a solid B. That's what it was designed for. It's designed for not having that much of a difficulty putting survivors on the hook. Next up, we have the rare nurse perk called Strider. Breathing of survivors in pain is 50% louder, and regular breathing is 25% louder. So what I like about Strider is the fact when they're in pain, typically it is actually semi-audible. It's not the greatest hearing when they're in pain and grunting. With Strider, it is extremely apparent, and it's almost like voice hunting. You're hunting them by their pain and the grunts, and it's super easy to pinpoint where they are and just down them. And when they're running and you can't necessarily hear, because sometimes like survivors be running and I'm focused on something completely different, like trying to figure out where the last person was, to where with Strider, I could tell someone was behind me. So instead of trying to figure out where I just lost one survivor, I go and immediately chase the other one, because that breathing is 25% louder, which actually gives away their location. Plus, these scratch marks make it a lot easier to find them too. And that's why Strider is in tier B. So, you know how I said Crew Limits was the only actual Demigorgon perk that I liked? I may have forgotten about this rare Demigorgon perk called Surge. You see, putting a survivor into the dying state with the basic attack causes all generators within a 32-meter radius to instantly explode and regress. This applies an additional regression of 8%. Surge can only be triggered once every 40 seconds. Now, Surge is especially great when survivors 3-gen themselves, and then you down them, and then here's... It is awesome. And Surge is actually, if not actually, like my favorite Demigorgon perk. And honestly, there's nothing else I can really say besides the fact this perk is awesome. So, with that being said, Surge is in tier B. Next up, we have the rare Trapper perk, Unnerving Presence. Now, this is actually one of my favorite Trapper perks because of this. Survivors within your terror radius have a 10% greater chance of triggering skill checks when repairing, healing, or sabotaging. Triggered skill checks success zones are reduced by 60%. This perk actually messes up even the best of skill checks, because that skill check is now extremely small and it catches you off guard. So when that triggers, a lot of times, even for me, and I've actually seen this with a lot of people I play with, they cannot hit this skill check for some reason. And they can hit the backwards skill checks of the doctor and all the other stuff. But when it comes to Unnerving Presence, for some reason, this perk literally just messes them up. And when I've played as it, a lot of people couldn't hit skill checks when I was near them, because I would just hear like generators were blown up like crazy once they like heard my terror radius. And that right there is why Unnerving Presence almost got the B+, but the next perk we're gonna be talking about in tier B, the final perk in tier B, you can see why that one is getting the B+. But as for Unnerving Presence, it is a high favorite here in tier B. So getting the B+ award of tier B, it is going to be the rare Cannibal perk and Knockout. Basically, what that means is dying survivors' auras are not revealed to other survivors when they are standing outside of a 60-meter range. The only thing that stopped Knockout from being from going into tier A was, and maybe this is just me, but I personally feel that Knockout would have been an A perk if they would have only had maybe anywhere from 8 to 12 meters meter range. If they weren't standing, within that range, they shouldn't be able to see it. That would have made it the ultimate A perk, but still, nonetheless, Knockout, you are the B+ of tier B. Now let's go on to the recap of tier B. So the perks that are going to be in tier B are going to go as this: Agitation, BBQ Chilli, Bloodhound, Cruel Limits, Dead Man's Switch, Franklin's Demise, Devour Hope, the Hex, Mad Grit, Play With Your Food, Remember Me, Save the Best for Last, Thanatophobia, Tinkerer, Corrupt Intervention, Discordance, Forged Penance, Iron Grasp, Knockout, which you get in the B+, Strider, Surge, and Unnerving Presence. Now let's go on to tier A. Next up is the very rare Nurse perk called A Nurse's Calling. The auras of survivors who are healed or are being healed are revealed to you when you were standing within a 28-meter range of them. This is a great perk because, simply put, when you're trying to get that hit and down them and you lose them because they're going trying to heal themselves, you can basically at this point find them via the aura, and now they're going to be running, and then boom, it's a quick down. This is a really great perk, and honestly, a massively big game changer that I recommend for every single killer, if I'm being honest with you guys. Next up in tier A, it is going to be none other than the base game very rare perk, Bitter Murmur. Basically, each time a generator is fully repaired, survivors within 16 meters of the completed generator will be revealed for 5 seconds. When the last generator is fully repaired, all survivors' auras are revealed for 10 seconds. Again, another great perk because you can basically kind of dictate where the survivors are going by those 5 seconds and try to meet them up. This is, again, really great because this doesn't have any range for you. As long as they're within 60 meters of that respected generator, they're gonna be shown, and that means, hey, you can come right over there, and if you're close, hey, now you got a free chase, and I would instant butt whooping come to those survivors. That is why Bitter Murmur should definitely be on your perk list. Next up is the very rare Plague perk, Dark Devotion. You become obsessed with one survivor. Hitting the obsession with the basic attack transfers your terror radius to the obsession for 30 seconds and sets its radius to 32 meters. You are granted the undetectable status effect for the duration. The survivor with the transfer terror radius is also considered to be inside the terror radius for other purposes. The killer can only be obsessed with one survivor at a time, which is actually a very huge thing because now you can basically be undetectable, find other people while that survivor kind of rats them out because they're trying to run for help, run for cover. And let's be honest now, as a survivor, we have all done that thing to where we all like accidentally find our teammates and we're like, oh, hey, sorry I bumped into you, but hey, someone's chasing me, so you need to run. But now you may not be chasing them. That terror radius is there, and now you have 30 seconds to find somebody else and pretty much beat the crap out of them because you're undetectable. Again, another great solid perk, and honestly, I love the fact that this, as long as there's a survivor, you can only be obsessed with one, and you can keep this perk going. It's an amazing perk. It is definitely a solid game changer, and that's why it is in Tier A. So next up in Tier A, we have the very rare Spirit perk, Hex Haunted Grounds. Basically, 2 trapped Hex Totems will spawn in the trial. When either one of the 2 trapped Hex Totems is cleansed by a survivor, all survivors suffer from the exposed status effect for 60 seconds. The remaining trapped Hex Totem will immediately become a dull totem. This is exceptionally good because of the fact now that at this point everyone is a 1-tap for 60 seconds. And it doesn't necessarily expose everyone, just exposes that one person who kind of like, you know, broke the totem. But other than that, it still is great because everyone does suffer from that exposed status effect though. And if you're smart and really good with it, you basically can 1-tap 4 people, assuming they're in the same area, but at least you know you're going to be 1-tap 1 person when you see it. I mean, you always want to keep an eye on your totems, of course, so that's still a 1-tap opportunity that only people like Michael Myers get because of their power, so you have that opportunity now to 1-tap, and again, this is another perk that can quickly ruin a game because they just cleanse that totem, which is why some survivors playing as some killers won't cleanse totems, which will actually work in your favor. So as a killer, this is a perk that you may want to start thinking about putting on your perk builds, by the way, guys. So with that being said, that is why Haunted Grounds is in Tier A. Next up in Tier A, it is going to be none other than the base game very rare perk, Hex Noed. And basically what this means is when the exit gates are opened, well, actually, no. Let me rephrase it. When the exit gates are powered, and if there's a dull totem remaining on the map, it becomes a hex. And while the hex is active, survivors suffer from the exposed status effect status. I just said status twice. I just realized that. Whoops. Your movement speed is increased by 4%, and as long as this hex totem is on the map and not cleansed, that means everyone is a 1-tap, which basically means you can down everybody. And I mean all 4 survivors, if they're still remaining, with a 1-shot. There is no more injured state. They are going down to the dying state immediately, which means you could literally go from having the worst game ever to having the greatest game like ever because you just literally tapped 4 people, slugged, and then put them all on the hook right as that exit gate was open, which means you'll probably get a hate message going to you, because let's be honest now, that's happened to me a lot. But no, it is probably one of my favorite perks out there, and I highly recommend it for everyone. This is the perk that you must have on your build, especially if you're a person who doesn't really get a lot of kills earlier on in the game. It will definitely be can change your game from being really bad to a solid game for you, which is why Noed is in Tier A. All right, so next up in Tier A, we have the very rare plague perk, Infectious Fright. Any survivors that are within your terror radius while another survivor is put into the dying state will yell and reveal their location to you for 6 seconds. This perk can be extremely useful because when you've actually then hit that survivor, the amazing thing about this is that it then leaves the other survivors vulnerable. So if you have a perk like Now that we just talked about, not only then can you down that one person, you can also then hit the other that was just screaming, and now you have 2 survivors that are now down because you had Infectious Fright that tipped them off to you. So this could be a perk not only that gives survivors things away, and then you can get 2 for the price of 1 basically. So with that being said, that is exactly why Infectious Fright is going to be in Tier A. Again, another plague perk in Tier A. I can't say that you guys should be surprised because I mean, hey, the Plague does have one of the better perks of teachables out there, so this isn't that surprising. Yeah, no, Infectious Fright is a perk I definitely recommend for everyone as well, like I do with a lot of the perks in Tier A, because they are amazing perks that you guys should definitely be using. So with that being said, Infectious Fright is in Tier A. Next up in tier A is the very rare Legion perk called Iron Maiden. You basically open lockers 50% faster, and survivors who exit lockers suffer the exposed status effect for 15 seconds. Your location is then revealed for 4 seconds. Basically, I mean, just like the Legion quote says, this is no place for cowards, and honestly, if you think hiding in a locker is going to save you, not only do you become a one-tap when you get out of the locker, you basically just screwed yourself over. Because you are now revealed, those survivors are now revealed for 4 seconds, so that means you literally have time to sit there, find them, and down them. That is why Iron Maiden is in tier A. So next, to make the tier list of tier A, it is going to be the very rare Pig perk, Make Your Choice. Now, as a Saw fan, when I seen that they were going to put this perk into the game, I was extremely excited. So, for those who know, Make Your Choice is an extremely famous line from John Kramer, from all 1 through basically 7 Saw movies. Hell, I'll even put in the Jigsaw as that too, but I don't really think Make Your Choice was in it. I don't think anyone said Make Your Choice in the movies. I'm not quite too sure. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here. So, back to the perk itself. Make Your Choice basically is when a survivor rescues another from a hook at least 32 meters away from you, Make Your Choice causes the survivor to scream and applies the exposed status effect for 60 seconds. Oh my goodness, I could not speak right there. What is going on today? Anyway, basically, also, Make Your Choice has a cooldown, also 60 seconds. The reason why I really like this perk is because using this perk, the survivor who takes that one person off the hook actually is basically one-tappable, which means they don't go from healthy to injured, they go from healthy to dying state, which is extremely helpful. And honestly, if I could, I would actually play the little dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun while I did this perk, because I'm that corny. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Make Your Choice is extremely good. Plus, when you're sitting there and you can one-tap, not only can you leave that person you just one-tap on the floor, you try to go get the other person who just got off the hook as well. See, very, very useful perk right here. And that basically means at this point now, you can sit there and put 2 people on the hook for the price of 1 because you had Make Your Choice. Again, very useful, very helpful, and that's all I can really say is just positivity about Make Your Choice to perk. So next up in tier 8 is the very rare Doctor perk, Overcharge. Basically, giving you the long story short about this perk is when you hit a generator, it basically has the next survivor interacting with a gen faced with a tremendously difficult skill check. Failing the skill check, which 99% of the time they do, results in an additional 5% generator regression, which is awesome. And of course, if they do hit the skill check, I mean, of course, the generator is not going to explode. But like I said, 99% of the time, people cannot hit this thing. It is absolutely hysterical to watch. And what this perk really does best, it prolongs the game for a good maybe 5-10 minutes to make it easier to basically kill all 4 survivors. That's what the goal is, a killer. You want to kill all the 4 survivors as quickly, if not as effectively as possible. And with Overcharge, you can actually do that quite effectively. It is a massive game delayer, and this perk is one of the perks that will never steer wrong. It works in your favor 100% of the time, and it's a perk you need to have on, especially if you're a gen patroller. This is the only perk you need to have on. So with that being said, Overcharge is in tier A. So next up, we have the very rare Clown perk, Pop Goes the Weasel. Basically, when hooking a survivor, the next generator you break is instantly regressed by 25% of its total progress. Normal generator regression applies after the damage is done. Pop Goes the Weasel is active for 60 seconds after the survivor is hooked. This perk right here, just like Overcharge, will never fail you as long as you find a generator within those 60 seconds after you hook that person. Again, it regresses, it delays the game, and what better way than to, really delay the game to put into your favor than using Pop Goes the Weasel. It's going to help you. It'll never steer you wrong. And that, folks, is why Pop Goes the Weasel is in tier A. It is effective, it delays the game, and it is ultimately, in my opinion, a game changer. So next up, it's going to be the very rare Spirit perk, Rancor. Basically, each time a generator is completed, your obsession sees your aura for 3 seconds. Each time a generator is completed, all survivor locations, though, are revealed to you for 3 seconds. Once all generators are completed, the obsession has the exposed status effect, and you can kill your obsession. The killer can only be obsessed with 1 survivor at a time. Boy, was that a mouthful. So basically, I love Rancor. The fact you can one-tap your obsession and then Mori them without a Mori is phenomenal. But, and here is the big but, the fact that they can see your aura for 3 seconds does bother me, but I mean, you can see all survivor locations once the gens are all completed. Actually, my bad, correction. Once each time a generator is completed, so for 3 seconds. So that's also not bad. It's like you give a little to get a little. I mean, it's an even exchange, but still. That would actually be my only gripe with Rancor. And that Rancor almost got put into the B category, but the fact you can actually kill that your obsession made it all worth it to put it into the A tier. So that is exactly why Rancor is in tier A. Next up is the very rare pig perk called Surveillance. Basically, any regressing generator will be highlighted by a white aura. If the regression is interrupted on a generator, it will be highlighted by a yellow aura for 16 seconds. Noises created by the generator repairs are audible at an additional 8 meters, which means you can literally have extra time to figure out how you want to plant it, because you can hear the gen working for a little bit longer and farther away from you. Which means not only then can you be, quicker on your approach, more deliberate, you can also probably get a free hit before you actually try to, you can kind of surprise them. Even if you're using a terror rage killer, this perk is extremely good because that means you can literally dictate, again, another gen patrolling perk. You can now dictate how many gens you're gonna take when they're being repaired, yada yada yada. It's a great perk to have, and it works in your favor. Another perk that again can't steer you wrong, because you'll constantly be notified when gens are being worked on, when they're still regressing, and so on and so on. It's a phenomenal perk to have when you need to have in your perk builds, by the way, and that is why Surveillance is in tier A. So next up in tier A, it is going to be the very rare Ghostface perk, Thrilling Tremors. Basically, after picking up Survivor, all generators not being repaired by survivors are blocked by the entity and cannot be repaired for the next 16 seconds. Affected generators are highlighted by the white aura, and Thrilling Tremors can only be triggered once every 60 seconds. Here's the thing that's really good with this. This basically shows you who's going to be coming to save that survivor, which means you can then game plan and attack them and kind of ambush them before they actually get to the survivor. That is on the hook. So that means then now you can literally dictate and figure out which way and where they're coming from, and maybe you can even meet them midway and then down them before they can even get to the hook survivor, because you had Thrilling Tremors. You were strategically planning, and that's what this perk is made for. This perk is made to be, again, another strategical plan to figure out who was actually working on gens, what gens you need to now regress, and also do you want to attack the survivors and leave the generators alone for now, and then kick some behind after that. But that is exactly why Thrilling Tremors is in tier A. So next up is Trail of Torment. It is a very rare executioner perk. Basically, after kicking a generator, you become undetectable for 16 seconds. During this time, the generator's yellow aura is revealed to survivors, but this effect can only be triggered once every 60 seconds. This perk is actually really, really good, and I'll explain why. See, the best part about Trail of Torment is just on the fact that you're undetectable for those 60 seconds, which means you can actually incognito pop up behind somebody and they won't even see you or hear you because you're undetectable, which means you can pull that little Michael Myers, so aha, you ain't seen me, ha, I see you, and then wham! Then at that point, you can literally just, hit them, injure them, or down them because you had Trail of Torment, which means not only do you regress a gen, you become untouchable and can get a free hit on somebody if you find them within those 16 seconds, which is extremely awesome. And a perk you guys might want to actually start thinking about putting into your build. Trail of Torment, I feel, is highly underrated and should be used a lot more just on how useful and effective this perk is, and that is exactly why Trail of Torment is in tier A. So the next perk in tier A is going to be the rare clown perk, Bamboozle. Basically, your volt speed is 15% faster. Performing a volt action calls upon the entity to block the vault location for 16 seconds. Only one vault location may be blocked in this way at any time. The vault location is blocked only for survivors. It does not affect pallets. So this right here is the reason why it's in tier A, is because it stops looping. It is the only perk that successfully actually stops looping and then forces survivors to have to then be like, hey, do I either want to drop this pallet or do I want to get hit or try to see if I can juke him? That's all there is to it, and that's why Bamboozle is in tier A. So the last perk we have is a base game perk in tier A. It's going to be a rare perk called Hex Thrill of the Hunt. This will be the last perk I do before the recap and the A+ perk that I reveal. So basically, for each Dull and Hex totem remaining on the map, you gain a token. You gain 10% more blood points for the actions in the Hunter category, for each token as well, by the way. Survivors' cleansing speeds is reduced by 6% for each token, and gain a notification when someone starts working on a hex totem. Basically, this is great to reveal survivors' locations whenever they decide to cleanse a dull totem. It's great if you're running a hex type of build. It's great because not only does it reveal the locations, you can then safely protect your totems. It slows down the speed of cleansing totems, and on top of that, you also gain 10% more blood points. So this is a perk of all-in-one, and that is why Hex Thrill of the Hunt is in tier A. Now let's go on to the recap and reveal the A+ perk. So the A+ perk is going to be the Doctor's Perk Overcharge. So now let's go on to the recap of all the perks in Tier A. A Nurse's Calling, Bitter Murmur, Dark Devotion, Hex Haunted Ground, Hex No Ed, Infectious Fright, Iron Maiden, Make Your Choice, the A+ perk Overcharge, Pop Goes the Weasel, Rancor, Surveillance, Thrilling Tremors, Trail of Torment, Bamboozle, and Hex Thrill of the Hunt. So with that being said, everybody, thank you guys so much for watching. And if you loved this Killer Perks video, you also may like the Killer Powers tier list I did about 3 months ago. You guys seem to really like it. And if you haven't seen it, definitely I will leave the link and I'll put the thing up right now that you guys should be seeing. So with that being said, everybody, please do leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to BVTV. You've been here this long. And with that being said, everybody, please do stay off the hook.